You're listening to KSG Podcast. This is a short, crisp, concise, exam-oriented, edited editorial for civil services aspirants. In this podcast, we are going to talk about revival of nuclear power in Asia. Source for the content is Stapczynski's article for Bloomberg. Asia is giving the once-shunned nuclear power industry a second lease on life. Thanks to the global energy crisis, governments in Japan and South Korea are removing anti-nuclear policies, while China and India are looking to build more reactors to avoid future supply shortages and curb emissions. Even developing nations across Southeast Asia are exploring atomic technology. The embracing of nuclear energy comes after the prices of natural gas and coal, the two fossil fuels used to generate most of Asia's power, shot to records this year, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine upended markets. As the world shifts away from Russia, a major fuel exporter, supply will remain tight and prices high well into the future. That's making clean and reliable nuclear power very attractive for policymakers and utilities eager to rein in inflation, achieve green goals, and curb dependence on overseas energy suppliers. It's a dramatic turnaround for the nuclear industry, which spent the last few decades beset by cost overruns, competition from cheaper fossil fuels, and stricter regulations. Delays to major nuclear projects resulted in the bankruptcy of industry pioneer Westinghouse Electric. While the nuclear power comeback is global, gaining proponents from the UK to Egypt, the shift is perhaps most surprising in Asia, considering it had the closest view of the catastrophe that struck Japan more than a decade ago. The future of nuclear power was still looking bright until March 2011, when a massive tsunami hit the Fukushima Daiichi plant in Japan, resulting in the worst meltdown in decades. The incident convinced some governments that nuclear power's risks far outweighed its benefits, with Germany and Taiwan deciding to set deadlines to close down their fleets of plants. Mammoth costs of building new facilities and frequent delays also served as deterrents. Now, as power bills surge and nations deal with fossil fuel-induced inflation, governments are again looking to nuclear. It requires little uranium to operate, which is currently abundant, and it produces power around the clock, unlike intermittent renewable energy projects such as wind and solar. Also boosting the industry are advances in producing smaller and cheaper nuclear technology, including small modular reactors or SMRs, which may become attractive alternatives as tools to tackle climate change. The nation is in the midst of the largest build-out of reactors in the nuclear industry's history to meet its insatiable energy demand, while also curbing dependence on dirty coal-fired power plants. China currently has nearly 24 gigawatts worth of nuclear power capacity under construction and another 34 gigawatts planned, according to WNA data. If all of that comes to fruition, China will become the world's top nuclear power producer. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's expansion into atomic energy is also gaining momentum as India's largest power producer looks to develop two massive nuclear power projects. The country currently generates about 70% of its electricity using coal and around 3% from nuclear, but Modi is aiming to more than triple its nuclear fleet over the next decade. Even cash-strapped nations across Southeast Asia are looking at nuclear power. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. told Congress last month that he will explore nuclear plants to bring down power costs and boost energy sufficiency. Indonesia plans to start its first nuclear plant in 2045, part of an ambitious goal to reach net zero emissions by 2060. Not all governments in Asia are convinced. Taiwan hasn't changed its position to phase out nuclear power. It plans to shut its reactors at the end of their 40-year lifetimes through 2025. And Europe has shown that even having an enormous fleet of reactors does not always ensure power supply. France, one of the world's top nuclear power producers, is grappling with record-high electricity prices due in part to a litany of reactor outages. Meanwhile, next-generation projects such as SMRs are still years or even decades away and do not present an immediate fix to the current energy crunch. But governments and companies are moving to endorse the technology now to avoid the crisis of tomorrow. That's it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. To join KSG India courses and to crack the IELTS exam, visit ksgindia.com. You can also get a PDF of this podcast on ksgindia.com. Thanks for listening.